three and a two and one and we are you didn't do
Back. Right? Is that what I was supposed to do?
it. Cut the intro music.
Yeah, we're done. We are back. I'm excited to be here. A lot has happened since last week, since last week's episode with Betty. I'm still hungry after thinking about that podcast.
I'm more hungry. That was like the hardest episode to get through, even like hearing back and then reviewing some of Betty's work. Just I had to go out and buy a bag of chips and just
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 try to get something in you to satisfy that endless hole of hunger.
yeah, I think I had a bag of chips, a banana, and just like something else. It was just no rhyme or reason. Just
Crayons.
I was like a crayons. I was like a pregnant lady, kind of in third
That's awesome.
trimester, wanting every type of food possible.
Well, aside from trying to shove everything in your mouth to eat since last week, what else have you been up to?
I've just gotten back from Miami. I spent how many days there? I spent quite a few days there, almost a week, 5 days.
Jet setting, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great time. I went down on the Friday. I shot a wedding Saturday with my buddy Evan Rich. Great guy. And then we got to he showed me around Miami. I probably got a sunburn, but I tried to not let it take over.
So you were
Yeah,
down there shooting a wedding?
yeah, really awesome wedding. Right downtown Miami. Went into the art district called Wynwood something. It's just like this whole area where the side of buildings are just plastered with kind of local artists and even some international artists. Just not graffiti, but like proper art. When that wedding goes up, you'll be able to see it. They're beautiful stuff up there. And yeah, and then my fiance came down to meet me. She was in the city. She had a work conference, so it like all lined up perfectly. It was like a great little weekend. We got to spend some time just relaxing. We ran along the waterfront. We
Old Baywatch
actually,
style.
yeah, we actually ran. I'll make this real quick, but yeah, old Baywatch style, essentially. We parked up by the water and then we started running and we found we couldn't run. Well, we can't run the sand in our shoes. It's just way too hard. So we ended up running for like probably 5 or 6 kilometers, a few miles, in one direction on streets, nowhere near the water. And then when we got to the point where we had to turn around, we finally found the beachside path, like boardwalk thing.
Ah.
It was hilarious. But I got a really hilarious phone photo that I'll share on my Instagram of there was some sort of construction going on, and I took a picture of us selfie on the beach, and this guy was on the beach with this huge not dump truck, and it's got a big scoop on the front.
Okay, yeah, like a loader or something.
Yeah, loader. And he was like making faces at us. Yeah, but what have you been up to? What have you been doing?
This week has been phenomenal. Finally, submitted my taxes. Taxes are done with. Turned out great. Super excited about this next year. And you've been with me in this switch to Fuji. I officially posted all of the rest of my Canon gear that I was holding on to for far too long. I knew that I had to make the switch to Fuji, so
You crazy.
oh, I'm still scared. I'm still scared, man. I'm second guessing it, but I'm not second guessing it. It's just one of those things that, you're comfortable with something and giving it up is scary, but I know that, the decision that I'm making is the right one for my style of photography. Not saying that anybody else should go out there and, switch to Fuji unless your name is Callum or you have a son named Charlie. Hey, buddy, what's going on? Oh, he doesn't know what's going on.
Ah,
Yeah. So yeah, that's what's been going on with me. A lot of super exciting things. I can't wait for the future. Nikon and Samsung are going to start getting into it with the whole camera game with these 360 cameras.
yeah.
I cannot wait. I know that there's not a lot of support right now for 360 cameras or being able to view and how immersive they are. But mark my words, today 360-degree video is it's the next thing. It's coming. There's no way to stop it. It's inevitable. It's how everybody is going to be watching videos 5 years
360.
from now.
I no, don't want it. No, I don't believe it.
You don't believe it? That's too bad.
360 video. Why? Why? I don't need to see 360 degrees all at once.
Or you're not seeing it all at once. You're seeing whatever you choose to see. You look up, you look down, you look, wherever you want to. And
I
it,
think in a personal or like, some crazy, Red Bull, sort of thing where they're like you got a guy skiing and you could do that. But like you can't make films. Um, you know,
that's what you think. That is what you think.
You'd be
If,
watching a film and there'd be narrative over here, but then you're not very smart and you go over here and you're like you missed a whole scene
well, you
because you're
don't walk
staring at the
around, you
wall.
don't go somewhere else. You look at wherever the action is. So Charlie thinks that you're hilarious, Callum.
Thank you. I am hilarious.
There is a series right now made specifically for 360-degree viewing called Gone, where a mom is at the park with her child. She looks away for a second and her child is gone. And then you're guided through the investigation of, wait, what happened? You can look around, you can see whatever it is that you missed, and you suddenly become a part of the story. And when you're inside that story, when you feel those emotions, when you want to help, that is when you get suckered in. And that is the future.
Can you send me the link for that? That sounds kind of enticing.
I sure will.
Like, do you think it could take off in wedding videography?
Absolutely. Why do people hire us to capture their weddings? For that exact
Nobody
reason.
nobody hires me to capture wedding videography. For one, for
No.
two, I get your point. I already know what you're going to argue with me, and I lose. You win. I get it. You could plunk that. The thing is, you could plunk that thing in the middle, and then you've got 360 view of the guests, the ceremony, everything. So where, and maybe you're going to hate my question about this, where is the artistry?
I love your question. I think that it's a very, valid question. If you even look for 360 video on YouTube, you're going to see either one of two things. You're either going to see video from somebody who did it right, and you are looking around and you are just immersed in whatever situation you're in, or two, you're going to think, why am I watching this? This is the most boring video I've ever seen in my life. Like, I don't care how novel this idea of being able to look around is. It's becoming a number one, becoming somebody who figuring out where the action is happening and putting that camera right there. Think of how cool it would be up at the altar while the couple are saying their vows, right? You can look back and forth. You're like, whoa, this is cool. You can see some reactions of the guest. You can look back at the officiant. That's pretty cool. Maybe it's kind of novel, but think of the value that the bride and groom would have in that. If they're hiring somebody to just record video, imagine how much more that video is going to be worth when suddenly it's interactive and they can make it themselves.
Yep. No, I totally agree with that. I can't think of any negatives to it, but I worry that things like this lead to, a misunderstanding of artistry. Like, and this is the same way that, I have this, the pictures on the wall here, they are going to exist forever, at least until
Mm-hmm.
I no longer exist.
Yeah,
And I'm never going to have to worry about technology,
right.
um, having to work. There's no
Mm-hmm.
technology unless all of a sudden printers stop existing tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
which, I guess could happen, but not very likely. My problem or my concern with that is that 360 videography would there I like when I watch it, I don't even any director in the world make a mind-blowing Oscar-worthy film.
Mm-hmm.
I am literally watching it for the artistry and to be immersed in that specific person's idea of
Yeah.
that story.
Mm-hmm.
Something that concerns me in the public commercial world, like weddings, with a 3D video camera or 360 video camera, is that I will lose the sense of narrative that I want to experience or that I want someone to force me to experience,
I see
you
what you're
know?
saying. And here's my rebuttal. Film photographers said the exact same thing about digital. With people being able to just spray photos all day long, they're not taking their photos seriously. And it's not until a select few people do take it seriously, they hone their craft, they make it amazing, is when it really starts to take off and that it really gets the respect that it deserves. I guarantee that you've seen photos that you thought, this is terrible. This is a terrible photo. Yet it was taken maybe with a professional body. It's not the gear that matters. If you can tell an amazing story with something super cheap, then you just won. So it's figuring out, it's being able to know how it's used, being able to utilize it correctly, and putting it in those places where it's just really going to shine.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll just have to wait and see what comes out of it.
I'm telling you, I will be purchasing one. This has gone so far off track. I cannot believe it. So let's
Listeners, we're
go
sorry.
ahead. I am so sorry for what we have done to you. If you didn't approve of that tangent, let us know. We'll be better about it. So let's go ahead and talk about today's interview. Today, I think that we have an amazing podcast. And I know that you've heard me say this before, but I think that I learned more out of this podcast than I have in, several of our past episodes. And today it is with car photographer turned wedding photographer, Justin Haugen.
Yeah. Oh man, if you are just listening to us through iTunes feed, you need to get onto the website and go check out some of his photos we've put up. His stuff, his work with off-camera flash artificial lighting is next to none. It is so cool. And how he went from passion photographer to, in the automotive area to wedding photographer is just a cool story. I was super stoked hearing all about his life in the last 10 years. Raymond, I think you were too. It's just an amazing story, and I'm super excited to share that with you guys today because I think you're going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, this is one of the guests who has an approach to wedding photography where he wants to create what is in his head. And that, when I first started off in photography, seemed like something just for painters or for, other artists where they would create this world. Photography was a way to document what happened around us. But Justin's approach is, I see what is going on around me. This is what I want to turn it into. And his work speaks volumes. It recognizable as his own work. Like Callum said, if you want to check out his work, which you definitely should, head over to the show notes where we have links to where you can see all of his work, his Facebook, his website, his Instagram. And I'm telling you, you should pause this podcast right now, go check out his work, and then come back and listen to this podcast to get an idea of what's going on through his head when he's taking these photos.
Absolutely. I think we should just dive right into it right now. Let's get him on and get into it.
All right. So today's interview with Justin Haugen, let's get into it. Guys, we're back again. It's Raymond here as always with Callum. And today we have an awesome guest. Callum, let's get into it.
Oh, I just want a sip of coffee first.
I'll join you.
Yeah, everyone take a sip of coffee or water. Today, we have a really cool interview. We pulled Justin, I'm going to say his last name wrong, Haugen?
Haugen, correct.
There we go. Justin Haugen. He is a photographer. Where are you from, Justin?
Tucson, Arizona.
That's it, Tucson, Arizona. And he is, wow, amazing with off-camera flash, artificial lighting, complementing natural lighting. We're super stoked to have him here because he is going to get us all the way through, kind of how he started as a beginner photographer and how he kind of fell into using like epic lighting to, complement these compositions and stuff on his website. Raymond, I hope you're super excited. I'm super excited. How about we get into it?
I got my flash guns right here. I'm ready to go. Ooh. I can't wait to look at these things. So, Justin, like I said, we're super excited to talk to you. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got started into photography.
Sure. Well, from the beginning, I originally I moved to Tucson in 2001 after I graduated from high school. I'm an Air Force brat, and so I've lived all over. My dad was stationed in Korea, and that's where I was born. So he met my mom in Korea, and I'm going way back here. Australia, back to Korea, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Germany for 7 years, and then I graduated and came here in 2001. I've been here for 15 years now. And I started off doing graphic design in college. Actually, I was a computer science major. My parents loved that. After a semester, I decided I wanted to be a graphic designer because I was really into art and I wanted to combine my interest in art with computers because I love computers. And my parents weren't so thrilled about that, and I really want to. And the reason why it's important in my history with photography is that I was always needing great photography to supplement my design pursuits. You always wanted high quality imagery, and by about 2004, that's when digital photography was really starting to take off. There was a lot of DSLR bodies that were coming onto the market. We had the Rebel, and I shot with the very first Rebel. I shot with the Canon 10D in a classroom setting. And then my parents gifted me the greatest birthday gift ever in June of 2004. I got my first Canon 20D. And yeah, that's going way back, and I actually just gifted that camera to a troop former Marine who's suffering from PTSD in California. He reached out to me and saw a comment I had made on an F-Stoppers article, and was wondering if I still had the camera on hand, and it was sitting in my garage. So now it's being used by a veteran in California. So yeah, that camera's well traveled now.
Whoa, that is crazy. So, obviously, like you said, you have a bit of a military background. So I'm sure that you felt a little connected with this Marine. Well, I love that you decided to give it to somebody else to let them start on their journey in photography, because we all have to start somewhere. And as a business, photography is, relatively cheap. You don't have to buy, if you were a plumber, you'd have to buy a van, you'd have to fill it full of tools, you'd have to, go to school to become certified and whatnot. So relatively, photography is cheap, but getting started out for beginners can be quite a hurdle in terms of cost, because it's just a hobby. So I think that's really cool that you gave away that camera to somebody, and hopefully they can document their journey and, where it is that they're going. So it was just sitting in a drawer somewhere?
It was sitting in the garage in a pelican case somewhere. I've got a flock of pelicans in the garage. So
flock of pelicans.
But not, and I kind of got off on a tangent there about the camera, but I started with that camera and I shot. I think my life cycle for cameras has ran about 2 to 3 years at tops, and then I ended up with the Canon 40D. And at the time, I was shooting a lot of automotive motorsports. I was shooting editorial work for some publications on the West Coast. It used to be Prime Media, then bought out by Source Interlink, and they had the conglomerate of car magazines. If you know any kid with a lowered car and some big rims and fast cars, they probably read Import Tuner, Super Street Modified. I did a lot of editorial work for one called D Sport magazine, and I was in their masthead for about 5 years, shooting feature cars and going to race events and racetracks around the West Coast and sending them coverage. And at the time, when you're 20, 21, and you drive a '98 Nissan Sentra 4-door with that's beat paint and a coffee can muffler on it, you don't really have much going on in the way of I guess the kids would call it swag. So having a camera was my passport into places that I had no business being in. I found quickly, if you carry a camera and you walk around with purpose and authority and like you've a sense of belonging, you'll get into some places you never would anticipate have gotten into. And I was getting backstage access and into media pit access and for all these events. I had a website at the time for local automotive coverage, and I got to see a lot of cool stuff at 2021 that I wouldn't have seen without a camera in my hands. And I really owe a lot to photography to getting me places I didn't have any business having access to. So I shot a little bit of car stuff through those years and my formative years. But I also really hung on the coattails of my contemporaries. I had a guy who, his name is Mike Maez, Maez. And if you look out Mike Maez, he's got some incredible portrait work, used to do a lot of automotive. He's still shooting automotive for a auction house. And I think it's based in Florida, but it's like one of those Pebble Beach type auction houses for special cars. Yeah. Oh, incredible cars. And he started with the Rebel 2, and Mike's probably been about a year and a half, 2 years ahead of me in his photography career in terms of time. But he has always been way further ahead in terms of making it a business and a life stake for himself. He's been working at it for a long time. And just having a great mentor, somebody who was willing to let you come in on a shoot and pull the curtain back behind, what the wizard was doing.
Yeah.
And it literally, like, he would stand in one place and he would take a picture, and I would walk right where he was standing, be like, "What was your ISO at?" And that was the kind of friend he was for me. And he, stylistically, I really followed his work and tried to emulate what he was doing, because I think when you're starting off as a photographer, you really have no sense of what you want to shoot, or how you should be shooting it. So you just kind of follow,
The
you follow your
trends,
mentors.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was my early history with photography.
Very, very, very cool, because it sounds like when you first got that camera in your hands, right off the bat, you were really someone who just went out and shot in pure passion without any sort of like any sort of concrete direction about where you wanted to go with it. It sounded like you were really just getting into places because you were interested in capturing, different cars for one thing, but just different moments in life. So talk to us about that transition, because now you're obviously not just like an automotive photographer. You're obviously someone who shoots photographs people. So like, what's that transition been like?
I think as you grow up, your value system starts to change. And I did nightlife photography, where, friends would give me a bar tab and I'd come, get $50 and I'd go take pictures of people hanging out and the DJs that were playing music. And that's great when you're 25 and you're having a good time. But I'm turning 33 this year. My value system's changed. I have a girlfriend who lives with me, and her son who just turned 11 today, and we have a home life, and it doesn't behoove me to be gone in the evening times working nightlife. It doesn't, the things I'm interested in have shifted and changed. I loved shooting cars. I loved the coolness of it. And when you're in your early 20s, the coolness of it all probably registers a lot better with you than it does when you get older. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I wanted to make a cool car look awesome in a neat setting and have it posted, and getting it published in a magazine was like the icing on top of it all, because, oh yeah, I've been in this magazine. And when you're 22, that probably registers with my circle of friends greater than it does now at 33.
Yeah.
And I slowly transitioned away from really caring about the work. It didn't matter to me to make things look cool. There was no emotional connection to the work. And in the editorial world at that level, it doesn't pay very well. I would get maybe like 300 a feature. And that, I'd drive to Phoenix from Tucson 100 miles, spend money out of my pocket on gas, crash on friends' couches, go shoot an event, photograph a car, and then maybe like 2 months later, when the photos finally ran, I get a $300 check in the mail. And when you're working at Office Depot, that's not a bad little gig. When you're trying to feed a family and sustain a household, that's not a sustainable method of business. It wasn't a great way to make money long term. And now in that industry, I know it's saturated. People like to make fun of the whole mom tog term, and disparage that segment of photographers. I think there's a group that's even worse. And I say this tongue in cheek. It's the guys who are 18 to 23 who have a camera and are willing to do work for free, and they get it just for backstage access. But I've been that guy, so I know exactly how it feels. But I'm not as attached to the work anymore. You transition, your value systems change. And I like working with people. I like making people feel special through photos and capturing their memories that they can't remember the way that I photographed them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you do have a very unique way of capturing people, and I think that your work is extremely compelling. I like it a lot, but I think that you're right about the mom togs or momtographers. There is a lot of them because they're home, they're with their kids, they have this camera, they're going to try to take pictures of it. Inevitably, a lot of these moms are going to get really good at taking pictures, but there's also going to be a lot who, it just stays in auto. It sits, on a shelf. They don't use it too much. I think that it's the same, like you said, with the 18 to 20x-year-olds shooting cars, because it's what they're around, it's what they're passionate about, because obviously they like it, they think that they're cool, and just like the momtographers, there's going to be that core set who are like, man, I really like this, and then they're going to get really good at it. But there's also going to be a lot of people who, end up leaving it in auto, thinking that the camera's going to take great pictures. And I'm glad to hear that for you, at least, you became one to realize the potential of the camera and move past it. But I know when I was in that, set of, I was in that group rather, who did like all those cars. And I always looked at those magazines. And one thing that you'd notice almost immediately, maybe it's just because now I'm a photographer and I can see these things, but there is a lot of off-camera flash work in photographing cars. I think to accentuate the lines and then to really just focus on that car. Is that how you got started? When you picked up a flash and you thought, whoa, I can see what it can do when I'm shooting a car. Imagine what it can do for people.
Actually, my involvement with shooting cars never got into off-camera flash because of my timeline. Yeah, my timeline growing up with the advent of digital photography becoming mainstream was that the technology sucked. When I was getting into it, I don't think cactus triggers were even out yet when I started. And do you remember cactus triggers? That was like the original, I can't afford a Pocket Wizard, which was the only game in town. You had to have the Plus Max 2s. And now, I finally got my hands on cactus triggers, and they were inconsistent. They didn't flash very consistently. You're probably better off if you could own a Canon 4, the 580 with the commander mode and the IR slave. That was one way to go about it. I couldn't even afford to do that. I owned one flash. Yeah, I owned one flash, the 580EX. I still have it in my garage. It's the very first flash I ever bought. It's still working. But now I use these Kung Pao, the Young Yo flashes that are out.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get there. But
so how is it that you got started in flash photography? When did you pick up your first one and actually use it in terms of trying to tell a more compelling story through an image?
And I don't think the mindset was even of how to make compelling images. It was just, how do I light things that are dark? And you're arbitrarily trying to just blast light everywhere and do it in the most flattering way. I think everyone learns very quickly. Direct flash, not a good look. You start to learn on camera. Yeah. You start to learn it's great to bounce the light off the ceiling and use the little flash card. I think everyone starts putting the flash up the ceiling and the flash card, because probably then the instruction manual on the flash. I was just trying to find ways to light things more effectively, because I didn't want things to be so dark, and I wanted it to look. There's a aesthetic of production involved when you flashlight an image that kind of shows more value in the photo, maybe just from a more what's the word I'm looking for? From a more just from an aesthetic value in the image. It looks nicer. There's an appeal with light in the image. Now in my career, I think as you grow with the lights and you start to use them more, you start to learn it's not just arbitrarily blasting light where there isn't light. It's not just having a light source. It's where your light is coming from. It's the modifiers you're using to change the shape or the fall off of the light. It's where I don't light that might bring drama to an image and might tell a different story. So it's not so much just arbitrarily lighting things. It's being deliberate in how you use light to convey a message. And I don't think I had a sense of that early in my career, because I don't think it was on my radar. I just developmentally, I was just arbitrarily trying to blast things with light. So.
Okay, that makes sense. So now, like you said, you kind of talked about it a little bit. It's not so much about, trying to tell that compelling story in the beginning. It was just about trying to get a good exposure. And then once you figured out, oh, wait a second, if I move this light over here, I can get a different effect. So now I would say that you've pretty well got off-camera flash down, just looking at your work. So now when you go and you look through the viewfinder, how do you set up a shot thinking where flashes need to go?
And I think when you look at a lot of these photography groups on Facebook and the discussions that are going on with beginners about light, everybody wants to know, what was your flash power? What was your ISO? What was your aperture? What was your shutter speed? And all those things are very valid. But I think what gets lost in it is the philosophy of the light, I'd like to say. It's the why am I lighting, how am I lighting isn't the only important thing to consider. The direction of your lighting is a big thing. I always want to, and I did a session recently at a at a place called Golf and Stuff here in Tucson, and it's an arcade where they have arcades, golf. What a great place to do a session for an engagement session. And when I was there, I knew that I couldn't bring like big soft boxes. I love big light. I love on a wedding day, I will bring an Einstein and a power pack, a Vagabond battery kit, and a 28-inch beauty dish that's heavy as all hell. Because I know
what a man.
Yeah. And I know that the reason why I do that is because I know the next guy that a couple may book will not bring that equipment on a wedding day, and if they are, then that's all right with me. But I know that my competitors aren't doing that. I'm putting an effort into lugging around heavy gear on a wedding day when it really has no business being there on a wedding day, for the quality of the light that it provides and the strength of power I can get out of it to balance or overpower daylight. But when I went to this arcade, I knew I had to work with small flashes. I knew I had to I knew I had to work with small flashes, and I knew that I'd be around people. There'd be mixtures of light going on, all the devices making their lights. And what my light had to do was not only provide light for my subject, but it had to be believable. It's not just like arbitrarily light. I want to convince the viewer that when they see it, that they believe that light source was actually part of the scene and not just someone hanging a flash where they couldn't see it. So I had one photo where they were in a photo booth, for example, and I had them sitting on the couple, the bride was sitting on the groom's lap, and I had through the other side of the booth, I had an assistant sticking a flash into the photo booth with what's called a MagMod spear. And I want to do a quick shout out to MagMod, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. They're fantastic. We both love them.
Great. And they just announced new product today on their website, on their Kickstarter campaign. So it's the Mag Beam. That's a pretty cool looking product. And the Mag Gobo. But anyway, I used what's called the Mag Spear. It's this big silicone spear. It's translucent and it's got a round quality to it. And it's also known as the Mag Boob if you're on the MagMod forums. Yeah. It's been dubbed that recently because it looks like a big silicone boob. And I had that attachment on the flash. I had an assistant poking it through the backside of the photo booth, and it was lighting the bride and groom who were sitting in their lap. And I had them act out like the machine was on, and they were doing a photo strip of images. And so, pose here, do this, kiss, be silly, hug, all these different things, make silly faces. And the light source is key here because I'm not just lighting them. I'm convincing the viewer that the light on their face is actually the light from inside the photo booth. Maybe the screen, maybe the flash going off. That's a believable lighting situation. It's not just arbitrarily get light on their faces. The direction of the light is convincing that I am, I'm augmenting a scene and making believable light. I had another one where, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I love that. I think that was the perfect explanation as to why somebody should even pick up a flash, just to make photos look more natural and set yourself apart from other photographers who are maybe natural light photographers or aren't as skilled in their flash work.
And I think once go ahead. Sorry, Kyle.
No, I was going to say is, kind of at the start when you were talking, you said something I thought that was really, really hits home everything you've just said in the last few minutes. And that's the intent about how and why and when to actually bring artificial light into a photograph. Not just to expose, a whole image, but where and even what areas you shouldn't light to create some sort of dramatic play with shadows and highlights. And I think that was super impressive that, you're at the stage in your career where you identify that every time you go to take a photograph with off-camera flash. And as you ran through that shot about the arcade, we're going to have some of those photos in the blog post on our website, so you can get some examples of Justin's work. But it's convincing, and that was the first thing I noticed. I was like, oh man, I can't really tell. I was like, that could be artificial flash, but that could also be what is coming out of the screens or coming from somewhere else in the arcade, kind of the amusement area. And I think that was just that blows me away. Like every time, like that, I'm bowing down right now, right here.
Oh, thank you.
But you are talking a little bit of like MagMod. We just kind of touched on in gear and stuff, and Ray's not gonna like this because he's a Canon guy, but you
No,
recently
I just sold my Mark III. It's gone. It is
you
gone. I am
you
officially 100% Fuji.
Oh, I got a
you
confession to make with you guys.
you recently just switched from one system to another, didn't you, Justin? Where did you switch from into?
So, full disclosure, I was a Canon user for 10 years. I started, like I said, with the 20D and a friend's Rebel, worked my way to a 40D, and then the next step was a 5D Mark II, and then finally I jumped into a 5D Mark III, and that's what I shot hard for a good 2 years. I really put those, I had two of them, and I put them to good use during all these weddings. I beat them up. And I finally made the jump and sold all of it and went to Nikon. And I now shoot
Oh
with the
yeah.
D750.
I don't know if you guys know or not, but there was a recall posted today. But anyway, go on with your story.
I saw that recall. I don't think my cameras are affected by it. It hasn't bothered me yet, so I'm good.
I'm
So
just
what,
kidding.
Justin, why did you jump over? Why did you switch? Is it just because of the 750 or
Specifically, I'm really interested in the Sony technology and sensor technology.
cool?
Canon has been really missing it in their sensors, and I think they haven't really heeded the call of professionals. And I think if they don't get on board with it on the 5D Mark IV, they could see an exodus of people leaving the brand, going to Nikon. And I did this with. I mean, I was really hurting when I made this decision because I love Canon Professional Services. They treat their pros very good. The service is great. I can borrow gear to try it out on loaner with no hard sales tactics involved. But I love the form factor of the gear and the ruggedness of it and the menu system and the button placement. Everything is intuitive. It's one of the reasons I got into Canon in the first place, and it all made sense to me. Since I've jumped to Nikon, I can't say I'm fully on board with the D750's layout. It's a weird camera, and it's in their lineup. Oh, funny! I got a pop up on my computer right now. It says Nikon Message Center. I don't know where that came from. They're listening. They're listening to our conversation.
Don't say bad thing.
But they're like, yeah, it's all. It probably wanted me to type something to them to talk about the camera. What do you think about our cameras here? It's a really odd camera in their lineup. They put the best autofocus system in the camera. It topped the D4S from their top pro body, but then it's got the form factor of like their I don't even know the bottom lineup, D7300 or something like that. Or 5500.
Yeah.
It's got this like Rebel-esque form factor to it. It's comfortable and lighter. My hands were getting tired of the Mark III, and it's got this swivel or the flip screen, which is awesome. But there are some frighteningly maddening things about it that drive me nuts. I hit the lock button on the aperture lock all the time, and next thing you know, like, why am I not changing my aperture? I bump it or my cheek. It's very sensitive. Both my eye cups are gone. I think every D750 owner is missing an eye cup. Maybe no.
I don't even know where mine are. I lost
Yeah.
mine. I don't even know when.
Yeah, they popped off. They kept popping off until I finally lost them in the field somewhere. So the eye cups are terrible. It's just there's just some weird nuanced things about it. The camera really should be it's a spiritual successor to the D700, but it's not like a physical one. And I'd love for the body to be more pro. It's not, but I'm for it for all intents and purposes. I'm using it in a pro way. I love the sensor technology on the camera. I don't know if you've seen much comparisons, but the 5D Mark III, its dynamic range versus the D750, there is no comparison. Even in the Fuji world, to Sony, there's no or to Canon, there's no comparison. The Canon's technology is 5 years behind, it feels like. And if they stick to their guns and the sensor tech and their next camera and do their own thing and don't get within a ballpark of the Nikon sensor performance or the Sony sensor performance, I think they're going to lose more pros. But I feel like they might be smarter than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll agree with you completely. That's one reason why I switched to Fuji. On top of, I love the smaller form factor. I love being able to take my cameras places without having people look at me and say, "Oh, that's a professional photographer," and then just give me this weird fakeness about the quality of their reactions. But when I picked up that Fuji, one of the hardest things for me to get over before I fully made the switch was that I was going from the Mark III, a full frame camera down to a crop sensor. And I thought that that was really going to hurt my photography. But I think that the quality of the glass, which is I've never seen anything like it, as well as the quality of the interactions that I get from people in front of me, has made this camera something that I've been willing to fully invest in, and sell all my. It's all right there. It's all ready to go. All sadly, bye. But I think that you're absolutely right. I like to shoot everything as close to as right in camera as possible, which is one reason why I'm okay with Fuji. And I would say that there's more dynamic range in the RAW files than Canon, but nowhere close to Nikon, nowhere close to Sony. I see some of the photos, of Sony. If you're in any Facebook, photographer group, about a month or so ago, people just started posting photos of their Nikon files that were just like pure black, and then they raised the shadows, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, bright sunny day, like this is amazing. And they just all turned out incredible. There's no way that you could do that with Canon. There's no way that you could do that with Fuji. So I think that they all have their own special place. When photography was, starting out, even just in like 2006, 2007, Justin, I'm sure that you're going to be able to attest to this, is that there was always a Nikon versus Fuji argument. And now I would say that it's not as strong of an argument, because now instead of which image quality is better, it is what camera system works better for you. I would say for wildlife photographers, Canon, no doubt. Nikon, nobody else has any sort of lens selection that Canon has when it comes to longer lenses. When it comes to, wedding photography, I'm going to give this one to Nikon. Just the amount of range that's in those files is just unsurpassed. It is fantastic to see, that a company like Nikon is able to innovate by using Sony sensors, and they're not scared to keep their own Canon sensors. And unfortunately, I don't know how valid these claims are, but I've heard a lot that Canon is still sticking to their own sensors, albeit, supposedly better. They're not going outside to go with somebody who's dedicated on making these things the best that they can be. So, forgot where I was going with that. That was a total tangent.
All I would want to add to that is that I think both of you made a really good point, like about the 750 being an amazing camera, and I love my Nikon, my 750, and we talk about kind of you can go 4 stops below, and just, especially at low ISO, and you can just bump it that 4 stops back, and, you have a completely usable file, it's like nothing ever happened. That's a great thing when you do that intentionally. But for someone who might be a beginner, that can be almost the lazy way out of kind of learning how to expose an image well.
Yeah, very valid point.
And properly. If I had the D750 quality 6 years ago, 7 years ago, or whatever, when I got a D100, if you remember the D100s from Nikon, which is like a relic, you couldn't do that. I think it was like 8 megapixels, that camera. I could push that maybe a stop either direction or something before it got crazy. That taught me to actually expose my images properly. And if I had the D750 quality where I could push 4 stops, I would just shoot everything in black and walk away. And I would never learn anything about exposing for the intent. But with that said, I really hope our beginners don't just go out and shoot black.
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And I learned a new term this last couple of weeks. Is ISO invariant, I think it's a term, and that means the way the sensor is designed is that the technology works is that you can anything between ISO range 100 to like 3200, maybe 64. You are just as well served to shoot at ISO 100 and underexpose the image and boost the shadows and exposure in post, and you could have a cleaner shadow detail than you would having shot it at ISO 3200. So there is some credence to just shooting at ISO 100 and having a bunch of black images and then later boosting in post. It's ridiculous, and I believe the Fuji cameras are, and the D750 is as well. Are you familiar with that term?
No, I've never heard of it, but that's
don't want to do it either.
6 stops. That's incredible.
I think I can push at the lower ISOs 5.5, 6 stops. I think
Oh
once
my
I get over around
gosh.
1600, it comes down a bit to like three
Mhm.
stops or so. I had a shot recently where I shot up at 6400. I think I got about a stop and a half before I saw quality degradation, especially in the shadows. A lot of like just chroma, kind of like purple fringing everywhere on anything. So I mean that's probably like a good saving grace, but not a great way to go about shooting everything. We do have a
No.
friend, Raymond and I, through kind of online forums, and he loves to shoot like 4 or 5 stops below for everything. But he's also amazing at what he does, so I can't really say anything negative about it. To each
And
their
I
own, I guess.
and I think for a lot of beginner photographers, when you're shooting, your realm is light. Like you're looking for light, you're looking for the best light. If you have a limited dynamic range, you're looking for what's visible. So you tend to live in the overexposed area of the spectrum, especially if you're a 5D Mark III user. You'd probably like, and that's why I think what's trending right now with our natural light photographers, people who tout themselves as only natural light shooters,
Mhm.
is that they're living in this lighted realm, and that's where they want the work to be because it's what that work thrives on on those cameras, and that's what they're is trending right now. Blogs like Style Me Pretty, you tend to see this very airy pastel overly exposed image, or playing with this sense of overexposure, the sometimes the flares, and I'm not, that's not my world. My world, I live in the dungeon of the spectrum, where it's dark. I want to deliberately choose where I want to have light. I'd rather, if you give me an option, give me a dark room to work in, or give me outdoors in a sunny backlit setting. I'd rather be in a dungeon shooting a couple in a compelling manner than being outside. That's kind of my
That's awesome.
preference of how I like
Yeah.
to shoot.
Cool.
So good.
I think, I've seen a lot of that because I grew up in Northern California and very close to Napa. And if you just, think of Napa wedding photography, Northern California wedding photography, it's that. It is very natural light. It is very backlit. And there is a lot of validity to these photos. They look fantastic, but I think that it's really holding back a lot of photographers not being able to grow, as well as really making the ones who do use any sort of off-camera flash really stand out when people see their websites, because it's something that they're not used to seeing, because the rest of the market is just saturated with natural light photographers. So I
Mhm.
like that. I like that, you take the approach that you'd rather create something than hope that whimsically it happens.
Yeah, and I think and I've had wedding situations where I've walked into poor scheduling, and I'm meticulous about schedule. I let a bride and groom know, if we're not at this stage of preparation at this point in the day, you're going to miss out on this, this, and this.
Mhm.
I want to make sure they know. Uh, our creativity thrives on extra time. Like if I can have the time with them and spend the time where I can look and venture off, and oh, let's try this over here. I'm going to hit a variety of looks, and really give them some options to look at, and maybe we'll shoot 5 different looks, and maybe only 2 of them are good and the three of them are bad. Like at least I have a higher hit.
Two,
I
yeah.
want to, yeah, I want to hit signature. I'm looking for key signature photographic moments on a wedding day, and if you want to let that creativity thrive and breathe, like give your photographer all the time he can have. Be ready earlier. Have your hair and makeup scheduled in the morning instead of right before your wedding. Like those are the kind of things I work with couples, so they know like we'll get these kind of images if you can live up to this end of the bargain. Otherwise, I'm kind of off the hook because the onus
Yeah.
is on them to give me that time. But and I don't mean to disparage the term, the air quote natural light photographer. We're all, it's all just taking pictures. And I think, and if you're an educator or you're someone who's looking to mentor or connect with other photographers, everyone who touts himself as a natural light photographer is a potential person who could learn from you, a potential understudy. So and I'd love to get into education in the future. I think, like I said, every natural light photographer is a potential understudy.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you being here for helping educate more beginners. So I think Callum's got the next question for you.
I have a question. If you had like maybe, you could give yourself in a 2 to 3 sentence sort of limits, some advice for your beginner self, to maybe help you along the way, maybe quicker or more efficiently to where you are today, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
I would tell myself to shoot more. To have a tool that you're not using every day is almost a waste of that tool. I think now in my career, what has really skyrocketed my growth, and I've been doing this 11 years, and in year 11, I'd say my learning experiences are are just as plentiful as they were when I just started. There's still things for me to learn. There's still education to be had. There's still growth and opportunity, and maybe even more now. It's like as you get up and up and up, you think you would plateau. I find that the information gathering is skyrocketing for me now. Like I just blew the lid off of the Pandora's box, and now I'm everything I want to try and learn and grab after is accessible to me. And I didn't explain this earlier about my career. I worked at a local missile defense company called Raytheon here. I was doing photography and video, but my primary duties was in a print shop. I printed proposals for big weapons to be shipped out to potential buyers. And I thought I was on the up and up in a company that I might be with for 30 years and that I would be a full-time photographer or videographer there eventually. But in a reduction of force, I guess I was lowest hanging fruit despite all my work titles that I was taking on. And so 3 years ago, it'll be in May, 3 years ago, when I lost my job, I had just turned 30, and I was looking at turning 30. Turning 30 without my career to land on, and I to depend on. And as a real big turning point in my life, I drank a lot of whiskey. I sat on a small severance that they left me, and then I really started to panic. I stopped mountain biking because I didn't have health insurance for a period of time, and eventually I started thinking, well, maybe I landed on some weddings. I had weddings on the schedule, and I started doing it. And I worked on my marketing. I worked on my website. My SEO got better. If you Google, I was at one point #1 search result for Tucson wedding photographers, and I did this in a matter of months. And when you have a lot of time and a lot of whiskey, you can do anything. so, but,
That's hilarious.
I got it going, and the next, 2014 rolled around, January hit, and for the first time ever, I experienced what booking season was like. Every day I was getting 2-3 emails a day for weddings, and then my rates were kind of middle of the road, and I took on like 30 weddings that year, and I felt completely overworked. And I know people who do more, but 30 was a lot. And then the next year I raised my rates. I took on maybe 20 weddings. I was way less stressed, and I had a better year than the previous year. And now I'm finally at a point where I see this as sustainable. It's not scary, and I'm trying to get back. I'm trying to get back to the original speaking point. What I would give myself for advice, because I get to do this for a living now, and I get to practice at it, and I get to shoot almost every other day. I'm shooting something different, and trying to take on personal projects too, and build these shoots up from ideas that I have. I really get to hone my craft, and I really get to sharpen my technique and my sensibilities about everything. I'm really growing my craft, and more in the last 3 years than I ever did in the previous 8 years. And so I would go back and tell myself, shoot more, shoot every day, shoot things you like, shoot things you don't like, shoot things that you're uncomfortable with, shoot things you don't even know if you should be shooting it. Just shoot everything until you find something that you connect with.
I love that.
That is amazing.
Awesome.
Shoot everything.
Shoot everything. Just keep shooting until you figure out what it is that you like. I think, Justin, that was some awesome advice. I think that we had a fantastic interview here today, and Justin, I learned a ton about your craft and how you go about seeing the light. I really like that. I'm sure that Callum picked up a ton of great info as well.
I did. Yeah, no, I think there was so much there that, I'm going to have a hard time getting this into a whole blog page.
Yeah.
I'm impressed with how you come about actually adding or subtracting light to your photographs, the ethos behind it, and even just your last statement about, you need to connect with what you're photographing. I think that's super inspirational for anyone, even beginner photographers or Raymond's phone call. That's ringing right there.
My alarm. It's time to wake up. Yeah,
Yeah.
Justin, again, I wanted to thank you a ton for coming on here and sharing, your knowledge that you had with a bunch of beginners who are looking to start their own road in photography to figure out what it is that they want to do. And, why don't you go ahead and tell us where it is that people can find your work and, check out more of everything that you do.
And I hate this because my last name is not phonetically pronounceable and spellable. So my full name is Justin Haugen, and the last name is Haugen. And you can find me at justinhaugen.com, on facebook.com/JH And you can find me on Instagram. My username is Justin_Haugen_photography.
Right on. Well, we're going to link to every single one of those in our show notes. And hopefully we can get some people out there to connect with you and just see, the difference in approach that you take to weddings, because I'm sure that just living it's harder for you to see how different from other photographers you are. But from an outside perspective, I think that your work is really special, and that I would be so happy if I got back, even just one of the images that I've seen on your Instagram featuring me. In fact, I might Photoshop my face into one of your photos and just say that you took it of me. So
sounds good. Preferably a bride.
Gee, thanks. I got that face.
You could be my first bearded bride.
We all got to start somewhere, but
that'd be a great wedding blog, beardedbride.com.
Some of the circus brides out there, for sure. But again, Justin, we wanted to thank you so much for being on here, and we hope that that your success just continues in the future, and we can't wait to see where it goes, man. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Bye.
See ya.